The Supreme Court just dropped a bombshell that changes everything you thought you knew about police encounters. 9 justices, 0 dissent, 1 groundbreaking decision that could save your life. And here's what makes this even more critical. This ruling directly impacts what happens when split-second decisions meet constitutional rights, especially for lawful gun owners. Let me tell you about a traffic stop that started with a simple toll violation and ended with 2 gunshots, 1 death, and a Supreme Court case that rewrites the rules for every police encounter in America. This isn't just another court case. This is about your fundamental rights when facing law enforcement, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The case is Barnes versus Felix, and what happened on that fateful day reveals a terrifying gap in how courts have been protecting our Fourth Amendment rights. Roberto Felix, a police officer, spotted a vehicle flagged for toll violations. Standard stuff, right? Camera picks up the violation, officer responds, pulls over the driver. Ashton Barnes was behind the wheel, and what happened next unfolded in just 5 seconds. 5 seconds that would reshape constitutional law. Felix ordered Barnes out of the vehicle. Barnes opened his door, appeared ready to comply, then suddenly hit the gas. In that split second, Officer Felix made a choice that would echo through the highest court in the land. He jumped onto the moving vehicle, clinging to the open door as Barnes tried to escape. 2 shots rang out. The car stopped. Barnes was fatally wounded. 5 seconds. That's all it took. But here's where things get complicated and why this matters to every single person watching. The lower courts used something called the moment of threat rule to analyze this case. They looked only at those 2 seconds when Felix was hanging onto the moving car, isolated from everything else. Since Felix could reasonably believe his life was in danger during those 2 seconds, they ruled the shooting was justified. Case closed, right? Wrong. Dead wrong, according to the Supreme Court. See, this moment of threat doctrine creates a dangerous precedent that extends far beyond traffic stops. Think about situations where police officers don't identify themselves before entering a home. Think about no-knock raids where homeowners might reasonably defend themselves, not knowing who's breaking down their door. Under the moment of threat rule, courts would only look at the exact instant when force was used, ignoring crucial context that could determine whether someone was lawfully defending themselves or unknowingly resisting legitimate law enforcement. The Supreme Court recognized this massive problem. During oral arguments, justices expressed serious concerns about scenarios where law-abiding citizens, particularly gun owners, might face deadly force because officers failed to properly identify themselves. If courts only examine the precise moment when shots are fired, they miss the entire picture. The failures in communication, the lack of proper identification, the circumstances that led someone to reasonably believe they were under attack by criminals rather than police. This brings us to the heart of the Supreme Court's unanimous decision. They completely rejected the moment of threat doctrine. Instead, they mandated what's called the totality of circumstances test. This means courts must now examine everything: what happened before the encounter, during it, and potentially even after. They can't just isolate those few seconds of violence and ignore everything else. Justice Kavanaugh, joined by Justices Thomas, Barrett, and Alito, wrote a concurring opinion that adds another layer to this analysis. They acknowledged something crucial. Traffic stops are incredibly dangerous for police officers. They're one of the most common situations where officers are killed in the line of duty. The justices wanted to make clear they weren't minimizing these dangers or the split-second decisions officers must make. But here's the key point from their concurrence. Acknowledging danger doesn't mean giving blanket immunity. Yes, Barnes created a dangerous situation by attempting to flee, but Felix's decision to jump onto a moving vehicle might have escalated things unnecessarily. The totality of circumstances test allows courts to weigh all these factors rather than focusing on just one moment in time.
Does the court look at just the moment of the threat, those 2 or 3 seconds when the perceived threat happens?
This case arose where Officer Roberto Felix shot Ashton Barnes after jumping onto his moving car.
It's the uncertainty of who is being approached and how a situation might escalate that could influence an officer's split-second judgment.
Taken a few decades and a lot of work and a lot of talking, but it has finally bubbled up and people have finally taken notice at the highest levels of American law.
It said in part that gun regulations must be consistent with the historical tradition of firearms regulations in the U.S.,
including how under the legislation, law enforcement officers and their supervisors could be subject to civil action individually.
Now let's talk about why this matters for gun owners specifically. The Second Amendment guarantees your right to self-defense. But what happens when you can't tell the difference between a home invader and a police officer? What if officers fail to announce themselves properly? What if they're in plain clothes? Under the old moment of threat rule, courts would only look at the instant you pulled the trigger, potentially ignoring the officer's failure to identify themselves. This new ruling changes that calculus entirely. Courts must now consider whether officers properly announced themselves, whether they followed proper procedures, whether a reasonable person in your position would have known they were dealing with law enforcement. This could be the difference between a justified self-defense claim and a conviction for assaulting an officer.
Decision that reshapes precedent for the country and gives one mother a long-awaited step toward justice.
50 states, all of our territories, everything that's going on, there is no uniform firearm laws across this country.
Supreme Court rejected the moment of threat approach, mandating a totality of circumstances analysis under the Fourth Amendment.
That family now is involved in some federal court action.
Shocker, they haven't changed the trajectory of their decisions, but it could have big implications for gun owners.
And whatever decision the justices make this year will be the law of the land nationwide.
The case has been sent back to the lower courts with clear instructions to apply this new standard. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The litigation is expanding. Barnes's parents, who are pursuing this case on his behalf, aren't just going after Officer Felix anymore. They're now targeting additional defendants, Department of Justice officials who declined to prosecute, local politicians who were aware of the incident, police department personnel who knew about the situation but took no action. The father, who's currently in prison and filing papers without an attorney, is pushing to reopen the entire case in light of the Supreme Court's ruling. This isn't just about one officer and one tragic incident anymore. It's about systemic accountability and how the totality of circumstances test might expose broader failures in how these situations are handled.
The 9-0 case that relates to Fourth Amendment rights. We've heard from Edwin, they're kicking the guts out of the Fourth Amendment.
Yeah.
Well,
Barnes now ties it all together, demanding officers document their entire approach before force is used.
Not having this Fourth Amendment to protect you and protect yourself from the police just entering your home without a warrant, that's pretty crazy.
How do courts determine whether or not the use of force is objectively reasonable?
With gun control being implemented in a number of states, even where least expected, this is not a bill that gun owners should ignore.
Detention and recruiting are things state police have struggled with for years, but if this bill passes, they believe it will only get worse.
What makes this ruling particularly powerful is its unanimous nature. In an era of deep judicial divides, all 9 justices agreed that the moment of threat doctrine was too narrow, too limiting, and ultimately failed to protect constitutional rights. When you get that kind of consensus from justices across the ideological spectrum, you know you're dealing with a fundamental principle of law. For everyday citizens, especially those who lawfully carry firearms, this ruling provides crucial new protections. It means courts can't cherry-pick the worst 2 seconds of an encounter while ignoring everything that led up to it. It means context matters. It means your reasonable perceptions and reactions based on the full situation must be considered. But let's be clear about something. This doesn't mean officers can't use force when genuinely threatened. The totality of circumstances test works both ways. If the full context shows an officer faced a legitimate threat and responded reasonably given all the circumstances, they'll still be protected. What changes is that courts can no longer ignore relevant context that might explain why someone reacted the way they did.
The public is demanding of its public officials that we take action.
The Supreme Court has answered that question in a recent decision, Barnes versus Felix.
There's a myriad of things that can tie you up legally, financially, put you in jail, or maybe get you in very serious trouble with the police.
A constitutional standard for police behavior throughout the entire United States.
Deadly force is only authorized if the officer has probable cause to believe that the suspect represents an immediate threat.
And then having no responsibility for their actions.
This ruling also sends a message to law enforcement agencies nationwide. Proper procedures matter, clear identification matters. Following protocols isn't just bureaucratic red tape. It's what distinguishes legitimate law enforcement from criminal activity in the eyes of citizens who might have mere seconds to make life or death decisions.
You need to be on the right side of the law because the legal system is complex.
If he had looked at the totality of the circumstances, he would have found the officer was at fault for this incident.
Public safety concerns must be addressed in ways that are lawful. This rule is not.
It is unconstitutional.
Every single officer that's trained is going to know how the Supreme Court found on this case.
For the Supreme Court, it's all about language, reasonable suspicion, objective reasonable belief, or probable cause.
This is not a gun decision.
No.
It's not. This was not decided on Second Amendment grounds.
As this case returns to the lower courts, we'll be watching closely to see how they apply this new standard. Will they find that Officer Felix's actions, viewed in full context, violated Barnes's constitutional rights? Will the expanded lawsuit against additional defendants gain traction? How will other courts around the country interpret and apply this new standard? These questions matter because they'll shape how police encounters unfold across America. They'll influence training protocols, department policies, and most importantly, they'll affect real-world interactions between officers and citizens. Every traffic stop, every home entry, every use of force will now be evaluated under this more comprehensive standard.
Officers face greater scrutiny. Courts can weigh how their actions contribute to the need for force. Citizens gain stronger Fourth Amendment protections.
And the question is, what should be legally considered when deciding if an officer's use of force is justified?
We want to see Congress pass laws that will help reduce crime without infringing on the rights of law-abiding citizens.
The fact that he jumped onto the car and put himself into danger is the issue here.
Even if you are innocent, your words can still be twisted and taken out of context.
That seems like guilty until proven innocent. That's not within the lawful jurisdiction of a government.
The Barnes versus Felix decision represents a critical evolution in Fourth Amendment jurisprudence. It recognizes that constitutional rights can't be adequately protected by examining events in isolation. It acknowledges that split-second decisions happen within broader contexts that courts must consider. Most importantly, it provides a framework that better balances officer safety with citizen rights. For those of us who take our constitutional rights seriously, particularly our Second Amendment rights, this ruling offers important new protections. It ensures that if we ever find ourselves in a confusing, dangerous situation where we must make rapid decisions about self-defense, courts will consider the full picture, not just the moment we acted.
First of all, it's important that you know the gun and concealed carry laws in your home state and anywhere you plan to carry.
The Supreme Court's ruling sets a precedent that will likely have a significant impact on police use of force cases moving forward.
It's going to affect how they interact with everyday people on the streets.
Departments may need to update their training, focusing on de-escalation before escalation.
This is when we talk about, hey, invoking your rights, or they didn't read me my rights, or they searched me without a warrant.
This shift could influence all circuit courts.
Results in better training and better policies that keeps officers safer as well as members of the public safer.
As developments unfold in the lower courts, we'll continue following this case and its implications. The expansion of defendants, the pro se filings from prison, the Department of Justice's involvement, all of these elements suggest this story is far from over. What started as a traffic stop over toll violations has become a landmark case that will influence police encounters for years to come. This unanimous Supreme Court decision sends a clear message. Constitutional rights matter, context matters, and courts must consider the complete picture when evaluating these critical encounters. Whether you're a law enforcement officer, a gun owner, or simply a citizen who wants to understand your rights, this ruling affects you. It changes the game, raises the stakes, and most importantly, it demands that justice consider not just moments, but the totality of circumstances. That's it for today, folks. See you in the next video.